Good morning, everyone. It is, what is it today? April 4th, 2020. I think Easter falls on the 12th this year of April. And as I talk about the New World Order and its tentacles, gripping the world now, and I've been talking about it actually for 34 years, and now it's pretty obvious in our face. Somebody said the other day, "Are you safe?" And I said, "From what?" I obviously fear the government and its, New World Order military apparatus, as like people did in the days of Hitler, far more than COVID-19, which, according to Tony Fauci, said that in the New England Journal of Medicine, that, while this virus, disease, whatever you want to call it, could end up being something like the 1957, I think, and 1968 kind of a flu pandemic outbreak that apparently was fairly destructive. And then, of course, even the more recent H1N1 swine, MERS, SARS, whatever, they had actually 10 to 20, even approaching 30% mortality rate. But anyway, Tony Fauci said, we could end up looking at the COVID-19 as something like, the 57, 68, but he said, if the numbers we're seeing now and projecting or whatever, I don't quite know. And you can go look it up, just Google Tony Fauci article in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was March 26th, so, a little over a week ago. But he thinks it's going to end up having a mortality rate of about 0.1%, which would be 1 out of 1,000. And he said this would also be in the elderly population of 60 and over, that many of them already have complications and problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there isn't anybody, medical, lawyer, antichrist, born-again Christian, anybody that could use the existing numbers and the article from the guy, Tony Fauci, he's the head of the CDC, which, I don't have any esteem for the organization, but most people do, so I try to quote their numbers and data and statistics in articles like by Dr. Fauci, to kind of make, but to make my point, which is that our response to this is insane, bizarre, but as I've said, it's agenda driven, and that's why this thing doesn't make any sense. When I say this thing, I mean the government lockdowns and all the countries of the world, mainstream media promoting these stories of fear, when as of 2 days ago, in the United States of America, which in the 2018 flu, we lost, I looked that up, 80,000 people, okay? And again, probably a lot of them elderly, although some of these hit the younger people, like I think the H1N1 and SARS were affected people of all ages and even the younger with strong immune systems. But, so where's my thread on this? So I lost my train of thought there, but anyway, using their numbers, we can see that the response is not at all proportional, it's not logical, it's not reasonable. Therefore, you have to conclude, and this is where you really have to be a Christian to come up with this conclusion, and Christians have been saying and warning, well, really for 2,000 years, but especially in the last 30 or 40, as we've moved into the modern, technocratic, feudal fascist world, we've seen literally the New World Order apparatus taking shape in every country, on every level, in every profession, and now it's really it's come to its apotheosis, if you will, and a lot of people still aren't seeing it. It's just unbelievable. Even though, I've been talking with several friends about Trump's statement, which I think was maybe almost 2 years ago, or maybe not quite that long ago, when he said before the press, he was standing with a bunch of military brass and other generals, whatever, there's probably 100 of them there, and he kind of cryptically muttered, a storm is coming, and some press person picked up on what he said, and I think it was a woman. She said, well, Mr. Trump, what do you mean a storm is coming? And he said, you'll see. So I was telling people about this before this whole thing hit. Well, now that it's hit, and I remind people that I told them this, they still don't get it. They still don't make this connection that Trump obviously knew about this huge false flag event that they were going to pull off. And, I have no idea if the COVID-19 was a bioengineered virus. My guess is, because that's the type of work that we do, probably was. I don't know if we planted it in China, blah, 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 and then, of course, knew that it would spread throughout the world. But again, even if this thing was, bioengineered, et cetera, the point is that it was a planned event. So more than likely, either the virus was bioengineered to do what it's doing, which is not nearly what the mainstream media is saying, as bad as they're saying it's doing, not even close, that clearly Trump was in on the planning, knew of it. Why would he say otherwise? A storm is coming. And I tell people, if this isn't a storm, I don't know what is. I mean, this makes 9/11 look like child's play. And the other thing, in the last several years, I've been saying that, 9/11 was our first major false flag event in America. Hitler actually had his henchmen burn the Reichstag building, which is the parliament building in Germany, and then Hitler, and this is what really is a classic false flag, so Hitler takes over the media or gets on the media and basically says to the German people, the communists did this, fire on the Reichstag, but yet his own people did it. So in other words, the event really happened. So false flag doesn't mean the event doesn't necessarily happen. What it means is that the blame for it is pinned on a party that the wicked people want to basically get rid of or wipe out, whatever. So Hitler knew that if he could get rid of the Communist Party, then basically he'd have a complete lockup on the German nation, which is exactly what happened. So the Reichstag is a classic false flag event. Hitler knew how to work that, and he used it to perfect effect. And 9/11, as what I tell people, was our first major domestic false flag event, and I called it kind of another Reichstag. But anyway, so the last several years I've been saying that, Rapture or Reichstag is next on the calendar. And I said, I don't know if the rapture is going to come before the Reichstag. And again, Reichstag is an expression used to define a false flag event. I don't know if the rapture is going to come before or after. Of course, I had prayed that it comes before, because I don't want to be here, even in this time when things are just so messed up and people have lost any ability to think clearly about this thing, and they basically believe what the government and mainstream media is telling them, which is thoroughly depressing. And so anyway, but here we have, in other words, this Reichstag event that I said would be that or the rapture. Well, it happened. It's happening in our, right in our face right now. Giant false flag event. And again, not saying that the COVID-19 is not a real virus and that it does real damage, especially to the older population. Going back to what Fauci said in the New England Journal of Medicine, those things could all very well be true. And obviously, Jesus talked about many signs of the last days. Pestilences and plagues would be one. Well, we've had so many pestilences and plagues. I'm actually the victim of West Nile virus in 2005. That's just one of the many pestilences and plagues. And so COVID-19 is definitely a type of a pestilence or plague. What I'm arguing, though, is that in this case, it's like, Henry Kissinger, one of their cheerleaders, said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And what he meant by that is that we can use, a crisis, whether we create it or whether it's just, happened willy-nilly and it's part of God's judgment on the world. We New World Order people know what to do with it, because they're, being Masons, they have this credo. It's called Ordo ab chaos, which means order out of chaos. So whether they create the chaos, which in many cases they do that vis-a-vis false flags, or whether they respond to, again, a type of a warning judgment by God, like what he did to Sodom and Gomorrah, and whether they use that to advance their New World Order agenda, it doesn't really matter, because they're always working to do two things, the Masons. They're working to install what they know to be their world leader, which is Osiris, and which obviously the Bible knows that as Antichrist. And they're also working then, of course, to for the New World Order. So Osiris will, their leader of the world will bring a period of peace and prosperity and all this and that. That's what they believe. And this is why I tell people that Satan will always have a counterfeit of God's real thing. So we know in Scripture that there's going to be literally a millennial reign, 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ over the world, and he will rule the world from Jerusalem. Okay, it's going to be amazing for believers to be a part of that. But Satan's counterfeit kingdom, I've always told people, comes first. And so what you're seeing now is the beast system, and you can read Revelation 12 and 13, that describes how this counterfeit system is set up. We can just call it the New World Order. And And so that's happening before our very eyes. And all I can say is stay tuned. In the meantime, I don't know whether I'm in or out, but I'm a born-again believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm Stevie from South Dakota. Thank you.